Because we say you have as-salaf, then following them you have? How does al-khalaf connect to al-salaf? As-salaf. I want you to think about it from what we talked about. Because we said it's not separate. Through the isnad. So there's not going to be a separation between al-khalaf and al-salaf, and the connection between them is going to be through isnad. So everything that al-khalaf is going to practice is what they have authentically narrated from as-salaf. So once you define as-salaf, then that connection should be found through the chain of narration to al-khalaf. You follow? But now I want you to notice something. You're going to find something existing in the time of as-salaf, and then disconnect it, and people who would claim opposite of what as-salaf is, and there's going to be no connection. Keep your mind on the sanad. Right? It should always be like this. Right? Persons in between. When there's ever a break, that's when we don't trust it. Right? Whenever there's a break, then there's no trust. Right? Because now, that goes back to the statement of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, who said what? You follow? So keep your eye on all those things that's connected. Tell you. Let's go to the Salaf in belief. I hope it wasn't too many names today, was it?
No. What? Al-Hakim, is he a Salaf or Khalaf?
Al-Hakim was at the end of the Salaf. He died like 4 or 5. But his teachers were from the Salaf. His direct teachers were from the Salaf. But he actually falls after that time. So his shuyukh, and the shuyukh of his shuyukh was the shuyukh of the Salaf. But he actually died in the time of the Khalaf, at the end of the Salaf. But interesting, that generation in the 4th century is very significant. Because that generation met the teachers from the Salaf, and they were the teachers of the succeeding generations of the Khalaf. So that in between, and you're going to find some very deep statements in their books of hadith. Like for instance, you have Al-Hakim himself. Al-Hakim, he was the Sheikh of Al-Bayhaqi. Right? Al-Bayhaqi, among the early Muslim scholars who conveyed the beliefs of the Salaf, he did the most detailed work in his book called Al-Asma' wa Sifat. And Al-Hakim was his sheikh. So, and he relates in his book directly from Al-Hakim, who relates. So you're going to find the riwayat from Al-Bayhaqi to Al-Hakim back to the Prophet ﷺ, because Al-Bayhaqi at that time, one of the difficult things of reading his books is you get the book and you just want to get the meat, the points, but he rates everything with a sanad. So when you read his book, you're going to go through the sanad first before he talks about anything. Everything he relates has a sanad. You follow? And Al-Hakim was his sheikh. Right? But another great scholar among them was Abu Sulaiman al-Khattabi. He was right in that time too, and he wrote a book called Mu'alam al-Sunan, was the sharh of Sunan Abi Dawud. And in there you're going to find, because he was in that generation. Also among the great scholars who lived in that time was Abu Mansur al-Baghdadi, who wrote Al-Farq Bayna Firaq wa Usul al-Din. All of them in that middle generation between the Salaf and the next succeeding generations of the Khalaf, and you will see that connection right there. Very important, because that was in a time when they started writing a lot of the books. With that chain of narration. And all of those books have chains of narration. So, now we're talking about Aqidat al-Salaf. So that's talking about the belief of the Salaf. be on the work. Mashallah, hopefully I'm successful. I negotiated a deal that we're going to be one of the distributors of this book. Is being translated now. And it is called Ta'wil al-Salaf li Sifatillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? By an Azhari scholar, which the whole book deals with how the Salaf dealt with the verses and hadith related to the attributes of Allah. And one brother from Azhar, he's an American from Al-Azhar University, his name is Ahmed Mubarak, he's translating this now. And he called me, he's like, I want y'all to be among the, so inshallah it'll be something nice. But we're going to get a peep into this book from the Arabic, inshallah. So the Aqidah as-Salaf is, what did they believe? Now, keep in mind, I'm not mentioning for a reason what people claim. I just want you to identify a Salaf first. Like, so when you speak of the Salaf, you keep two things you're going to keep in mind when you talk about the Salaf. No, three, right? Whenever you talk about the Salaf, I want you to keep two things. Time, place, people. Right? Whenever you talk about Salaf, I want you to keep in your mind those three things. So whenever someone talks about the Salaf, ask time, place, people. Right? Because sometimes you're going to hear people talk about the Salaf, and they talk about people that are not in the time or in the place, or they are not the people. So it's very important to time, place, people, or place, time, and people whenever you talk about. So if I talk about if I talk about time, and I'm talking about the Salaf, what time am I talking about? Right. If I'm talking about place, and during that time, what were the main places of knowledge? Mecca. Medina, where else? Kufa. Where else?
Syria.
Sham. Yemen. Iraq is Kufa, Baghdad, Egypt, right? So you got these main, so we're talking about main centers of learning. The scholars of the Salaf, main centers of learning was Mecca, Medina, Iraq, Kufa, Baghdad, Basra, right? Egypt. These are main centers of the Salaf. So we're going to find, and towards Iraq, towards Iran, those areas, Khorasan, Samarkand, those areas. This was the areas of the Salaf, because why? It's important for you to know that, because Islam in the time of Salaf didn't spread too like it's all over the place now. It was in certain areas, right? And the scholars were in the main circles of learning was in certain areas. So you can kind of get a grasp if the person in that era, because one of the tricks that happens today, they'll publish books by a person who lived during the time of the Salaf, but in the time of the Salaf, and among the people in the place he was at, among the people, he was considered an innovator. Do you follow my point? Mm-hmm. So when it says this book is, like they have a book called Sharh al-Sunnah, right? The explanation of the Sunnah, and it's a book of belief. But that man was from Iraq, and in Iraq, in the time of the Salaf, among the people that he was considered an innovator. But they put it with the title Salaf, so you think it's Salaf. But this person, during the time of the Salaf, he was considered an innovator. Among the scholars of the Salaf, they wrote against him. So it's very important when you talk about the Salaf that you embody all these times. So history, and we should keep it important, history is extremely important. And you know the old saying, he who doesn't know history is bound to